Welcome back. Using a build workflow. So we want to set up a local real project with local, I mean, we don't use CodePen, but instead of we will have a project on our machine where we can work in with our own ID or core or editor. This of course is the way we want to work with React. We want to have it on our machine. We have more features available there. It's more convenient that than using some web editor and CodePen, which we used before, or JSBin, which we use in the optional second um, module, are really more playground than real work environment for real projects. So we will set up a local project, and React is actually more than just importing two files. We import it in CodePen. We need a more elaborate workflow for real projects. And this is recommended for both single page and multi-page applications. The question, of course, why do we need more complex and how do we then achieve it? Let me start with the why. When building a real app, we want to actually optimize our code. We didn't care about this in the demo project in the first codes module on CodePen, but for a big React application, we want to ship code that is as small as possible and as optimized as possible, obviously because that increase the performance of our app. Additionally, and that is a super important, we want to use this next generation JavaScript feature I thought you about in the last optional module. Now we want to use that because it makes our life as a developer much easier, and it's the de facto standard for React that to use all these next generation features because the code is cleaner, easier to read, faster, less error prone, and many other reasons. So you should really use these features. It's not just something nice optional. I strongly recommend it using these features. It is considered the best practice, and it is what I teach you in this course because obviously I want to teach you best practice. So we want to use next generation JavaScript feature to have an easier time to write less error prone code. With all of that, we need a workflow that support these features. Even on CodePen, we implicitly did this. So we want to use these next generation features. Essentially, we want to able to write ES6 or above code and still ship code in the end that runs on as many browser as possible. And not that many browsers support all these next generation features. That is why we need a build workflow that actually compiles these features. Finally, in the end, we want to be more productive. These includes next generation JavaScript features, which often allow us to write more condensed code. But it also includes things like CSS, auto prefixing. You might know that CSS prefixes are a thing that to achieve the broadest possible browser support for CSS feature. Now manually adding these prefixes is quite annoying, so automatically adding them is nice, or consider linking. So a tool which actually warns you if you are writing suboptimal code, that would be nice to have too. Not strictly required, but a nice feature, and all these things should be part of build workflow. Now implement them there. We need a couple of tools that actually let them run over our code to idiots want us in the case of linting, or to compile the code to code that runs on as many browsers as possible. We as a developer are writing very modern code that will on its own not runs. on that many browsers. So that's all why a couple of reasons why writing this kind of code is desirable and why we need a more complex build workflow that actually allow us to write this code that actually optimizes the code for us. And for that, the how of course is relevant. How do we achieve such a workflow? We first of all need a dependency management tool. Dependencies are simply third-party libraries. Third-party JavaScript packages, React, for example, is a dependency. The React DOM is a dependency, and also all the build tools we will need in the end are dependencies. So the compiler for the next generation to current generation JavaScript, that is a dependency. And we will use npm here, or yarn will be another tool you can use. But we will use npm node packages manager, a tool which just allow us to manage packages and which is just a de facto standard for managing dependencies also on front-end projects. Beside that dependency management tool, we need a bundler because we want to write modular code and split it up over multiple files so that each file has a clear task, a clear focus, and therefore is easier for us to maintain and manage. But then we want to make sure that all this code gets bundled into a couple of files in the end when we ship it, because browser don't even support split up files. Older browsers at least don't do. And it might also, even if they did support it, not be that optimal to make thousands of requests to all these tiny focus files. So we want to have that bundler, and we will use Webpack, which is the default standard for bundling these days. The cool thing about Webpack is it doesn't just bundle files, it also allows us to apply a couple of other build steps before it does this bundling. For example, the mentioned compilation of next generation JavaScript that require another tool, Babel. We need compiler that does this JavaScript compilation, which means translation from modern feature to works around that also work on older browser, and we will use Babel plus presets which can be hooked into the Webpack configuration so that they are part of this bundling and optimization process. And finally, in the end, we want to use a development server to test our app locally on our machine. Development server is a web server, but one running on our machine. We could open a HTML file by double clicking on it, but this will use the file protocol and will not correctly emulate the app running as it runs on a web server. So we need a web server, and we can of course run one on our local machine. I will teach you things in the best practice and recommended way. So all of the setup is quite easy. And as a side note, if you still want to dive into how this works behind the scenes and you want to set this up from scratch, I also got a module for that towards the end of the course where you will build a React app, a React project from scratch. Now with that, you know what we need and how. Now let's dive into that tool I mentioned and let's learn how we actually get started with a new React project supporting all these features.